what would be the minimum amount of effort required for Apple to be serious about, say, the $60 game market? What would be the minimum required effort, right? You think back to the Apple TV 4 and you think about, they got on stage and they had a controller and they had games, but they were phone games. It was the same strategy as the failed sort of Android boxes of the time.
Yeah.
And these are all failed platforms, in my opinion. None of them have gained significant enough traction to call them like huge successes. Minor successes, maybe, but no one's selling a ton of games on pucks. Nobody.
Yeah.
Now, usually when Apple looks at a market like that, they identify weakness and then they try to move, again, like sort of asymmetric to that. Well, in this case, they literally did the exact same thing as the Android boxes. And they called it a day. So when people tell me things like, well, the app economy just is, it's not there, the developers are, they're charging too little for their games. I agree with all of that. I really do. But that's really underestimating the amount that Apple can do by putting in even just a little bit of effort. Again, you sort of extrapolate what would be the minimum required effort to even attempting to nurture a situation in which you had higher profile games on iOS. What would be the minimum required effort? You might make a controller, you build your own. They didn't do that. They apparently internally built a controller, but they gave the design away to third parties and said, you do the controller. They apparently had an API ready for the Apple TV, and then they said, no, never mind. Like literally a week before the damn thing launched, they said, no, you got to require the remote. You can't use the game controller. You got to require the remote. Like, I mean, there's just no care, there's no focus there. They just don't give a shit about it. And I guess what I'm arguing more than anything is, like, one, they just haven't put in any effort at all in this space. They just haven't done it. So it's impossible to know what we can't know. But two, you think about the future of media, and it's like games are not getting smaller. It's not becoming a smaller segment of the market, and hardcore games are not becoming a smaller segment of the market. It's growing.
Yeah.
PC gaming is getting bigger, and it's like, and console gaming is getting bigger. So like all of these predictions, all these models that people had a few years ago about how mobile was just going to eat everything, and that gaming would definitely get squashed, that was completely wrong. So when all I'm saying is, strategically speaking, does it make sense that Apple would go for the hardest media thing they could do, which is start competing in television? Does that make sense? Or would it make sense to put in 5% effort, even 5%, just to try it? Open, separate games from the App Store, create a game store, build your own controller, release it, and start having $60 games on the Apple TV. Just see what the hell happens there. Maybe it wouldn't work. Maybe at this point it is too late. But they failed to ever do anything at all significant in this space. And I find any claim that this all just, it's just too late, blah blah blah, I find all that very dubious, because it's all based on these assumptions that have to do with the company as it is. And that's not how I think about Apple. I think about Apple as the company that looks at a market weakness or something that sucks, and they try to make it better. And I guess in this space, in my opinion, it has not gotten better. In fact, they've now sort of been responsible for some of the most exploitive software tactics we've ever seen. I mean, and we could pass that off to developers, but it's their platform. It's ultimately Apple's platform. They have complete control. If it's not on Apple, who is it on?
Yeah.
They're not Windows. This is not Windows. This is not a situation where it's just a completely open platform. It's called, we all jokingly call it a walled garden, and that's because it is. So if Apple doesn't have the control, well, who the hell does? So what I'm saying is, those arguments just don't make any sense. If Apple cared enough, they would be able to nurture an environment in which software can be better, in which they could have any price of games. They could have all sorts of things go on. It's just a matter of, do they care enough to do it?